Hi everyone, I am Mohammad Usman Khan from Pakistan, and today we have with us on stage Claire Melamed, Executive Director, Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. A very warm welcome from us.
It's great to be here, and what a great festival you put on.
Thank you so much. So I would like to ask some question on data. Why data is important in achieving sustainable development goals?
I like to think of data as a kind of critical part of the infrastructure for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Just like money or any of the other things which are essential inputs into social progress and into achieving the kinds of outcomes that the Sustainable Development Goals represent, data is a kind of critical part of the raw material for policy making. We can't, for example, if you're trying to run a health service to achieve the goal of getting health services to everybody and reducing maternal mortality, improving child survival, you can't do that effectively unless you have data on how many people you're trying to serve, on what kind of diseases people are suffering from, on where people live, on what drugs you need and how much they cost. All of these things which are data are absolute sort of fundamental part of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and of making a success of the policies that we need to get there.
That's great. You mentioned that data can facilitate us developing better policies. So how data can play this vital role in formulating better policies? Could you please explain this?
I think there's two critical ways that data can help to formulate better policies and help governments to decide what are the policies that they need. The first thing is through a better understanding of how their population is living, the kind of conditions that they're living under, whether or not they have access to water, to whether or not there are enough schools for all the children that are being born. These are all things that one needs to understand through data. But I also think that data can help to communicate to governments what it is that people want, and it can help governments to understand people's priorities. Of course, in a democratic system, people have a chance once every 5 years or so to vote for the priorities that they most believe in. But in between times, data is a way of governments hearing from people what it is that's most important to them. During the run-up to during the process of negotiating the Sustainable Development Goals, one of the projects that I was very proud to be part of was the My World survey, where we essentially went out and we asked 10 million people across the world, what are the things that are most important to them? And that became a really critical part of the information that we were then able to feed into the negotiating process, to tell the negotiators, no, this is what people are caring about. So these are the things that you need to put into the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think data can be helpful in all sorts of different ways, and different kinds of data have a different part to play in helping governments to set the policies and decide the objectives that are actually going to deliver the things that people want.
When we talk about data and technology, I always wonder that it is quite easy for developed countries to design policies or implement policies, but what about the developing countries where there is a digital divide, or there is a gap between government and people, and there is no e-government, or there is less digital literacy? So how can developed countries help developing countries in building capacities, or is there any other way to do this thing?
I think, first of all, it's important to recognize that data and technology are not the same thing. People have been collecting data for literally thousands of years without the kinds of technologies that we think are so important today. The Babylonians ran censuses using, I imagine, wax tablets or something similar. So data is not reliant on technology. One can collect data in all kinds of ways, and people have been, and it's really important that our excitement about new technology doesn't blind us to the fact that in fact, for those of you who are watching online, the closing plenary has just been announced, which is what you heard in the background. So it's critical that the kind of excitement about new data doesn't blind us to the fact that we have been collecting data for a long time in many tried and tested techniques that still work today in situations where where the technologies are not appropriate. That's not to say that, of course, there are all kinds of exciting things that we can do with new technologies. They reduce the cost of data. So we can do surveys and other things much more cheaply if we can transmit information digitally than if we have to write it all down. It can increase the speed of data. So we can know in real time how many children are in school, how many patients are in hospital, how many cars are on the road, all those kind of things, which again make policy making much easier and allow a sort of much more granular, responsive approach to needs. So I think in terms of the capacity building question, it is all of the things that we do. It is a question about providing the resources, providing the money. But I also think it's important that the traffic isn't all one way. There are some developing countries which are actually leading the way here. Kenya, for example, was a leader in mobile money through M-Pesa long before the rest of us, long before I started using PayPal. So I think, I think the traffic is not all one way, and that's one of the real excitements about this new world.
Thank you so much, Claire Melamed, for these insights on data and how data can help us achieving sustainable development goals. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Lovely to be here.